and welcome to Savvy Flare Patterns. Today we're thrilled to introduce our newest design, the Lagoon Jumpsuit sewing pattern. This trendy ready-to-wear jumpsuit highlights your waist with a belt, visually elongates and slims the legs with its cut, accentuates the hips and curves, and offers comfort whether styled for sports or a night out. Want to stand out? The choice is yours. Sew it in knit fabric, such as Ponte Milano, for comfort, or in suiting fabric for a more elegant, runway-inspired look. In this video, we'll guide you step by step through the sewing process. We're using the full printable PDF Lagoon Jumpsuit pattern with detailed instructions, available in our Etsy shop, link in the description. Let's get started. After you've printed the patterns, on the first page you'll see a form like this. On it you'll find a technical sketch, a control square to check the scale, and markings for 6 sizes. We'll be working with size 40 and need to correctly pick and cut the pattern pieces. To do that, we find our size here. Our size is 40, and it has this marking. Next, using the sleeve as an example, I'll show how to choose your size for the pattern pieces and place all the necessary markings, as well as how to work with seam allowances. For example, here is the upper sleeve piece. On it, we first find the line for our size and trace it along the outline. In our case, our size is right here, and we trace it all around the contour. This is how the outlined sleeve pieces for our size will look. Next, we need to choose the small markings for our size. They are added for the correct alignment of the pattern pieces. Marking 4. Here is our size for connecting with marking 4 on the front sleeve piece. Marking 5. Here is our size for connecting with marking 5 on the back sleeve piece. Next, we mark the elbow notches for your size. Right here, for connecting with the front and back sleeve pieces. We do the same for all of our pattern pieces. Next, we need to mark the seam allowances for assembling the pieces, which are measured inward from the edge, because they're already included in our pattern. Each line is labeled with the corresponding seam allowance. For the sleeve, we have a dart seam allowance of 0.8 centimeters. Our sleeve consists of 3 parts. The seam allowances for joining the front piece to the upper piece, as well as the back to the upper piece, are 0.8 centimeters. And the lower seam has a 1 centimeter seam allowance. All of this is written down so you won't get confused. The hem allowance for the sleeve is 2 centimeters. Step into the piece from the edge by the suggested allowance. This is how the pieces will look with the sewing lines marked on them. The seam allowance on the sleeve cap here is also 0.8 centimeters. Mark the notches of your size for sewing the shoulder dart. Center front bodice and center front trouser seam have 1.2 centimeters seam allowance for the zipper. On the front trouser piece, the 1.2 cm allowance on the center front seam goes to the notch. Then the seam allowance goes 1 cm. The side seam allowance is 1 cm. The side seam allowance on the front is also 1 cm. Also, the waistline seam allowance is 1 cm. Also, on the pieces there are such gray dots marked. They are marked to show the areas for interfacing. They are on the cuffs. These dots are also on the center front, and on the trousers under the zipper. And also in the pockets areas. These are the areas to reinforce with fusible tape to prevent the fabric from stretching. Also, be sure to reinforce this area along the center front so that the zipper does not become wavy. The large numbers on the pieces are marked to show the placement of the garment pieces on the fabric layout. They match. For sewing the jumpsuit, you will need the following materials. Main fabric. Jersey knit. Additional fabric for the sleeves. Rib knit. And also fabric for the pocket bags. Stretch cotton knit. More detailed fabric selection recommendations can be found in the instructions. Notions for sewing the jumpsuit. Threads matching the fabric. 5 spools. Zipper closure. 5 pieces, 160 centimeters long. And 4 zippers 18 to 20 centimeters long. Fusible tape for reinforcing the pocket openings and the zipper area along the center of the jumpsuit. You will also need the following tools during work. Fabric cutting scissors. Paper scissors. Thread snips. Tailor's pins. Tailor's chalk or heat erasable pen for marking. Measuring tape. When working with knit fabrics, it is also very important to use special needles. These are stretch and super stretch needles. They have a special rounded tip that does not leave holes in knit fabrics. It is essential to use these needles when working with knits. To sew a knit jumpsuit, you should have an overlocker and a regular sewing machine. It is desirable to have an overlocker, since the main assembly of knit garments is done on the overlocker. But if you don't have one, we will show you how to set up knit stitches on the sewing machine. You will also need an iron and an ironing board. All materials must be pre-shrunk before starting work. This can be done in 2 ways. Either wash them in the washing machine, or pre-shrink with a steam iron. This is the method we will use to pre-shrink our fabrics. You must also pre-shrink the zipper tape. When pre-shrinking fabrics, choose the optimal temperature for your fabric, starting with a low setting and gradually increasing to the required one. All fabric cuts and zipper tapes must be pre-shrunk. When pre-shrinking zippers, choose the temperature carefully so as not to melt the plastic teeth. Next, we make the fabric layout with the pattern pieces. Lay out the main fabric with the right sides together, and place the pattern pieces face up on the wrong side of the fabric. Arrange the pieces according to our layout diagram. For convenience, I always print it out so I have it in front of me. First, place the trouser cuff pieces according to our layout diagram, like this. Check that the grain line direction matches the grain line direction on the fabric. Next, I trace this piece with tailor's chalk. I have already done this. And then here we have the fold line. We need to fold it and place it like this. Here I put weight so the piece lies flat and does not move. And again I trace my piece along the outline. These pieces need to be cut twice on the fold. The next pieces are laid out according to our layout diagram. For example, I place the next piece, piece number 10, this is the front part of the sleeve, it will be placed here. And the second piece, this is the back part of the trousers, and it will be placed here. And according to this diagram, I lay out these next pieces and cut them. I decided to trace these pieces here with tailor's chalk. We also mark all the notches we have. And for convenience, I also label the pieces so as not to get confused later. For example, piece 10, piece 2, piece 6, and piece 5. This way you can orient yourself and not get confused during sewing about which piece is which. To prevent shifting, pin the pieces together when cutting. This will ensure your pieces are identical. After you have pinned the pieces, you can cut them out. On all pieces at the notches, make a small cut with scissors, no more than 2 to 3 millimeters, so later it will be easy to find and match the pieces when sewing. I also strongly recommend transferring these marks. They will serve both as a designation of which piece it is, and as a mark for the wrong side, since the fabric is double-sided. And so as not to confuse the right side with the wrong side, we will have such a mark. And we will not confuse them during the sewing process. The collar stand piece will also be cut on the fold. Place it on the fold, as shown in the layout. Next, lay out the upper sleeve piece on the rib knit fabric. Fold fabric right sides together, pattern face up on wrong side. Cut out the pieces, marking all necessary notches. In the same way, lay out the pocket bag pattern on the additional stretch cotton knit fabric. Place the pattern according to the layout diagram, keeping the grain line direction. As a result of cutting, we get the following pieces: front bodice piece, 2 pieces, back bodice, 1 piece on the fold, collar stand, 1 piece on the fold, front trouser piece, 2 pieces, back trouser piece, 2 pieces, cuff pieces, cuffs for the back trouser pieces, 2 pieces, and cuffs for the front trouser pieces, 2 pieces. These pieces are cut on the fold. Front and back sleeve pieces, 2 pieces each. From the additional fabric, the upper sleeve piece, 2 pieces, and also from the cotton knit, you should have 4 pocket bag pieces. Now we move on to interfacing. Before starting to interface the main pieces, be sure to select the optimal iron temperature and pressing time, starting with low, on another piece of fabric. Knits are easy to damage or to cause heavy shrinkage. To interface the pieces, place them with the wrong side facing up. Here we have a mark showing the piece number and also the wrong side. Arrange them in front of you like this, with the wrong side up. Next, take the tape and check the right and wrong side. To identify right and wrong sides, run your fingers. The wrong side has tiny glue dots, the right side is smoother. Next, measure the required length of tape and cut it off. Do the same for the other piece. Lay out the piece. You can also place just one for now. Like this. To make it easier to apply the interfacing tape, smooth it out, place fusible tape glue side to the wrong side. Then, using a steam iron, fuse the tape, pressing the iron and holding for 5 seconds. Similarly, fuse the second front half along the center edge. After interfacing, lay the pieces on a flat surface and leave 10 to 15 minutes for the glue to cool and set. Next, interface the pocket openings and the center edge up to the control mark on the front trouser halves. Also interface the pocket opening line on the back trouser halves. For this, also place the pieces with the wrong side facing up. Measure the required length of fusible tape. Interface the front trouser edge from waist to the control mark at the zipper end. I measure and cut it off. You also need to interface the pocket areas. First, I fuse this part. Next, for convenience, I place the side edges of the trousers next to each other. The pocket opening line must be interfaced, extending 1 cm beyond control marks 10 and 11. Similarly, interface the pocket opening line on the back trouser halves. On the cuff pieces, I recommend first marking the interfacing area, since it goes only on one side, along the side seam edge of the cuffs. So I place the pieces as I cut them. And I mark that I need to interface this edge and this one. Accordingly, on the second piece I also need to interface this edge and this one. The same applies to the second piece. That is, we interface only the side edge. Next, I place the pieces face down again. Like this. It's convenient to have these marks. And I measure and cut the required amount of tape. Similarly, we interface the front parts of the cuffs. As a result, the front trouser cuffs must be interfaced in the zipper stitching area. The back trouser cuffs must also be interfaced in the zipper area on both pieces. The center front edge must be interfaced on 2 pieces. The area under the zipper on the front trouser halves, as well as the pocket openings on both pieces, must be interfaced. The pocket opening line on the back trouser pieces must be interfaced. Before starting work, we must prepare our equipment, check stitch settings, install special needles, the super stretch or stretch type I showed at the beginning of the video. We will go over how to set up the sewing machine for knits. I will show the most common stitches, overlock imitation, straight stitch, and other types of seams. First of all, we install a special knit needle. It has a rounded tip that does not damage knit fabrics. The machine is threaded, now we go to the settings. And our first stitch will be an overlock imitation. On the selector, it is marked like this. Let's try to make it. I turn this selector to the letter C. Then on the upper selectors here, I set the maximum width. I take a small piece of fabric to test the stitch and check the settings. This stitch is perfect for simultaneously sewing and finishing the edges of knit fabrics. Sew smoothly, do not pull the fabric. The finished seam will be strong, elastic, and neat. The next option is this one. We still stay with the blue stitch. This is a reinforced overlock stitch. It has stitching on both sides. And this is the second option. Here the overcast edge looks a little different. And like this on the right side, this seam is also strong and looks neat. It is also elastic. The next stitch is the straight elastic stitch. It is necessary for sewing the pieces together. It looks like 3 parallel lines. The symbol for the straight elastic stitch may look like this. On my machine, it is not shown. And this is what the finished stitch looks like. It is also elastic, as you can see, and it does not break. I stretch it really hard. We use this stitch for sewing pieces together. For finishing the edges of knits, you can also use a zigzag stitch. This is how it looks. Set the stitch width to 3 mm and the stitch length to 1.5 mm. And this is the thin, neat zigzag you get. Be sure to press the stitches after you make them. It is also elastic like this. If you set the zigzag to a smaller width, for example 1 mm, and set the stitch length to 2 or 1.5 mm, you can use this seam for sewing, not just finishing. And this is the resulting stitch. It is also very elastic. It looks neat. Here you can hardly see that it is a zigzag. On the right side, you get a neat seam like this. The last sewing option is the zigzag for finishing edges. Here we set the maximum width of the zigzag and the stitch length to 2.5 mm. And this is the overcast seam, also elastic. On the right side it looks rather loose, so I recommend combining this zigzag stitch with an elastic stitch and using them together. This is what different stitches for knits look like. With these stitches, your garments will be strong, elastic, and neat. Be sure to press all seams after sewing, and choose the most suitable option for your fabric. Now we move on to sewing. So, we begin sewing our jumpsuit, and we will start with assembling the sleeve. Place the upper sleeve part, the front and back sleeve parts in front of you. And so you don't confuse the front and back parts, place the patterns and check that everything is arranged correctly. Check, everything is correct. Also check right and wrong side of the rib fabric. Next, we need to pin the pieces along the elbow and front edges. For this, match the back sleeve piece like this to the right side of the upper sleeve piece. Align the elbow notch. Match marks at number 5. When matching notches at marks 4 and 5, it is important to align the notches and cut edges, not the numbers. Next, take the front sleeve piece and align it with the upper sleeve piece. Also place the pieces right sides together, matching the elbow notches and notch at mark 4. There are also control notches at the bottom, align them as well. And one sleeve is already assembled. Next, pin between the notches. Pin the second sleeve in the same way. The sleeve pieces are pinned. Now we need to sew along the front and elbow seams. I will stitch from the side of the back and front sleeve parts. At the beginning and end of the seam, be sure to backstitch. Use an elastic stitch, sewing 0.8 centimeters from the edge. At points 5 and 4, we must finish the seam so that, after turning the pieces, they form a single continuous line. For this, arrange the pieces like this. The seam ends here, at the intersection of these two pieces. Right here. We also start the seam from the other side so that the pieces meet exactly at this intersection. Start the seam from here. When we finish the seam this way and then press the pieces, it will form one continuous line without a step. And this is the resulting seam. It is elastic. The sleeve pieces are sewn along the front and elbow edges. On one sleeve and the other as well. Now the edges must be finished on the overlocker. So the overlock stitch from the side of the front and back sleeve parts. I am finishing on the overlocker, but you can choose one of the imitation overlock stitches I showed at the beginning. And this is how the finished seam looks. To save time, before pressing the front and elbow seams, we will immediately sew the sleeve dart. Place the pieces right sides together, find the notches here, align them, and pin. Along this notch, and here at the edge with a slight overlap, so that when sewn the neckline edge on the sleeve forms a smooth line without a step. Pin the dart edge, and to make the seam as precise as possible, I recommend marking the stitch line here. Make the marking using a heat erasable pen and a ruler. The seam allowance for sewing the sleeve dart is 0.8 centimeters, so mark 0.8 centimeters with a ruler. You can also mark using a pattern, cutting out the allowance area. On unpinned pieces, I'll show on the second one. Lay it out like this. Align the notches, and draw the stitching line. It's important here to make the marking smooth and rounded so the finished seam lies nicely on the shoulder. At this point, the sleeve dart seam should end. After marking, fold along the line and pin. Here we find our notch, pin it. And also pin here. Here there should be a small overlap. Next, go to the machine and sew along the marked line with a smooth curved seam up to the neckline edge of the sleeve. At the beginning and end of the seam, make a backstitch. The seam allowance is 0.8 centimeters. The shoulder dart is sewn, and now it must be overlocked from the front sleeve side. After serging, carefully finish the seam and hide the thread ends. For this, I carefully pull the threads and tie them off so the seam ends smoothly without loose loops. Now tie a few knots and hide the thread ends inside the seam with a needle. Now all seams must be pressed with an iron. I start pressing from the dart seam. Now I set aside one sleeve, take the second, and press the front and elbow seams. Next, place the sleeve piece face down and press the allowances of the front and elbow seams toward the upper sleeve piece. To fix the allowance position, I use a wooden block like this. You can also use one if you have it, to cool and fix the seam allowances. While the sleeve is still open at the bottom, I recommend pressing the hem now. It is much easier than after sewing. For this, place the sleeve and mark the hem allowance from the edge. The hem allowance is 2 cm. Measure 4 cm from the edge. This line will guide us when pressing the hem allowance. Mark it like this. Now fold the hem allowance to the wrong side, aligning the edge with the marked line, and press. Use the wooden block to fix the position. I also recommend trimming the seam allowance here, about 4 mm. Trim the allowance at the fold by no more than 3 to 4 mm. And in this area, press the allowance in the other direction, like this, so that when we fold and stitch the hem, there will be no thick spot here. And press again. Do the same on this side. Lay the allowances in opposite directions. This helps reduce thickness and makes it easier for the needle to pass through. The dart allowance must also be pressed toward the back sleeve piece. I first do this in the shoulder area, since this is a raglan sleeve. Then I turn the piece like this and press from this side so it looks neat here. If you have tailor's pressing pads, it is more convenient to do this on them. For example, I have this one. I can place the sleeve on it. Or you can use a special sleeve pad. And the allowance can be pressed directly on these pads. The shoulder will look like this, so that this dart end here does not stick out. It's best to use a pressing pad to shrink out the dart tip so it doesn't stick up. I place it like this, press with small circular motions, and let it cool. And now, see, nothing sticks out here. When we wear the garment, there will be a smooth line from the shoulder to the arm. Do the same pressing for the second sleeve. Now the sleeve must be sewn along the underarm edge. Place right sides together, align the edges, match the notches, and pin with pins. Then sew the sleeve underarm seam on the machine with a 1 cm seam allowance. At the beginning and end, make a backstitch. Now I also recommend starting with the bodice front and back. We need to sew the side seams. Place the back piece right side up, and lay the front pieces on top, right sides together. Match marks 8 and 7 along the side seams on both sides. Pin and sew the side seams the same way as the underarm seam. Align marks 8, then align mark 7 on one side seam, and do the same on the other. Then sew the side seams 1 cm from the edge. At the beginning and end of the seam, backstitch. After sewing the side seams and the underarm seam, finish the seam allowances. Finish the allowances from the front piece side. Here is the front piece, so we finish from this side. One allowance is serged from waist to armhole, the other in reverse. Now finish the underarm seam from the front sleeve side. Here is the mark showing this is piece number 10, the front sleeve half, so we finish from this side. Before pressing, I also recommend finishing the sleeve hem so it can be pressed during the same step. This saves time. Finish the sleeve hem from the right side. While finishing, remember to turn the seam allowances in the opposite direction. So while overlocking, fold the allowances like this. Also, clip the underarm seam allowance 3 to 4 mm here and fold it to the other side. So when we fold the hem, there's no bulk from the seams. Now make this notch. I clip it so it stops 2 mm before the seam line. Here I cut into the overlock seam, since this allowance is 1 cm and here it was 0.8. Now when finishing, these allowances fold to the back sleeve side, and those to the front sleeve side. And I overlock like this. While overlocking this edge, try not to stretch it, just guide the fabric. Especially in the rib knit area. Then lift the knife to finish the seam smoothly. This is how the hem looks now. Then we fold and stitch the hem along this line. Now, as usual, tie off the threads, make a few knots, and hide them inside the seam with a needle. Do the same finishing on the hem of the second sleeve. Press the sleeve underarm seam. Also press the sleeve hem that we finished. Press carefully without flattening the line we already shaped. Next, press the underarm seam allowance toward the back sleeve. For this, I use a sleeve pressing pad like this. I insert it into the sleeve, and it's very convenient. If you don't have one, lay the piece flat and press only along the seam with the iron tip. I don't place the iron flat so as not to press out the allowances we already shaped. I insert the sleeve pad inside the sleeve and press the seam allowance. Press the hem allowance in the opposite direction. It's very convenient on the sleeve pad. Fold the hem allowance to the wrong side and press with the finished edge inside. Finish the second sleeve the same way. Next, lay out the bodice pieces, press the side seams, then place them face down and press the allowances toward the back. Do the same pressing on the second side seam. Finish sleeve preparation by securing the hem allowance with a stitch. Secure the hem allowance with pins or hand basting. Now stitch the sleeve hem from the right side, about 1.8 centimeters from the edge. Since the hem allowance is 2 centimeters, so step back a little to catch the edge. I recommend starting the seam at the underarm. And this is how the finished hem looks. The waviness will go away after pressing. The stitch here is elastic. You can also finish this area with a cover stitch machine. Press the finished sleeve hem. Now we need to sew the sleeves into the armholes. Lay the bodice in front of you face up, take the sleeves and find where the front and back parts are. To easily see which is the front and which is the back, just check the direction we pressed the seam during ironing. This is the front of the sleeve, and this is the back. So this is the left sleeve. And we find the correct position for it. Here is the front of the sleeve, and this is the front bodice. So we match the front with the front sleeve, and the back with the back sleeve. Like this. Now pin them, matching the control marks. Match notch 2 here, leaving a small step. Next, match notch 4 on the front sleeve seam with notch 4 on the body front. We align the edges where the seam will run, 0.8 centimeters from the edge. Pin the notch at mark 4, then match mark 8, the side seam of front and back, and the sleeve underarm seam. Here the allowances must be spread in opposite directions. Pin, aligning the seams together. We pin the marks 8. On the back, mark 5 and the mark 5 on the sleeve, here it is. Finally, match notch 1 at the neckline edge with notch 1 on the sleeve. At the neckline, place the allowances as a step, so after stitching and pressing it forms one straight line. Do the same with the second sleeve, first align by notches, then pin between them. Here I pinned both sleeves, matching all control notches. Now sew the sleeve into the armhole with a seam 0.8 centimeters from the edge. At the beginning and end of the seam, make backstitches. Here is the result of sewing in the sleeves. Finish the seam allowances, then we will press them toward the sleeve. So serge from the bodice front and back sides. Do the same finishing on the second sleeve. Press the sleeve seam allowances and then press them toward the sleeve. Do the same pressing on the second sleeve. Now prepare the collar stand. Place it on the ironing board. Fold the stand along the fold line, face up, and press the upper fold, aligning the lower edges. Now sew the pressed collar stand into the neckline. First mark the seam allowance from the center front edge. Measure 1.2 centimeters with a ruler and mark the point where the collar will be attached. So the collar will be sewn starting from this place. The zipper will be attached in this area. After sewing, it must form one continuous line. Mark the 1.2 centimeters allowance. Now pin the collar stand to the neckline. Match notch 3, the center front. Next, notch 2, the front shoulder seam. And notch 1, the back shoulder seam. Also align the center back of the neckline with the center of the collar. Lay the garment face up, find the back neckline center and the collar center. Match these notches and pin. Here is notch 1, align it with the sleeve back seam. Notch 2, align with the sleeve front seam. Then notch 3, which is the end of the collar. To sew correctly, mark 0.8 centimeters seam allowance on the collar. Place the edge of the collar like this. When attaching the collar stand, the 0.8 centimeters allowance must match this 1.2 centimeters allowance mark. Like this. I will start stitching exactly from notch 3. From this point. Make sure the sleeve dart seam is pressed to the back. Pin the other side of the collar the same way. Here is how the collar looks in the neckline. Now sew it on the machine, starting from notch 3. Stitch the collar, ending at notch 3 on the other side. Backstitch at the beginning and end, seam allowance 0.8 centimeters. The collar is sewn into the neckline. Here's the sewn collar. Now serge this edge from the collar side. Then press the allowances toward the garment and top stitch. Press the neckline seam allowances toward the garment. Lay the garment and press allowances to the garment side. And here is the finished collar stand. Now serge the front center edges, separately on right and left. Sew from the right side. Press the overlock stitch. Now move to the pants. We continue sewing the jumpsuit with the pants. And we start with the pocket. Prepare the front pants pieces, back pants pieces for pocket bags, and 2 zippers for the pocket opening. So, let's start. First, sew the side seam without stitching the pocket opening marks. Marks 10 and 11. Place the front and back pants pieces right sides together. Pin at control mark 7. Then match control marks 12 on the front and back pants. Next, match marks 15 at the knee level and marks 14 and 13 at the hem. Then pin between the marks. Now sew the side seam from mark 7 to mark 10. Then from mark 11 to the hem marks 14 to 13. For this seam, I use a small zigzag stitch. Do the same on the second side seam. Sew the side seams with a 1 cm seam allowance. At the beginning and end, backstitch. At the pocket opening, backstitch before the notch. Skip the pocket opening, backstitch at notch 10. Sew, and backstitch at the end. Do not sew the pocket opening area. Start stitching from mark 10 with a backstitch. At the end, also backstitch. Sew the other side seam the same way. Now take the zipper and place it face to face with the pocket opening. Its top should align with mark 10. Pin it. First pin one half, then the other. Now pin the second side. When pinning the second half, make sure the zipper top matches mark 10. When pinning the zipper, check both sides are even. From the right side, it must look neat, with no folds or puckers. So always baste the zipper by hand first for accuracy. Here is the zipper basted in place. From the right side, check how everything looks. It should look neat here. For sewing zippers, use a zipper presser foot like this. Now place the garment with the basted zipper under the foot and stitch from mark 10, a little above it. Make a backstitch. Sew the whole zipper and stop at mark 11, making a backstitch there too. Stitch about 1 centimeter from the zipper edge. For this, I move the needle to the far left. To avoid the slider getting in the way, open the zipper while sewing. When you reach the slider again, lift the foot and, if possible, move the slider up with the needle down. If not, carefully lift the needle. Push the slider up. Then lower the needle back in the same spot and finish sewing at mark 11. Even a bit lower is fine. Sew the other zipper tape the same way. Check the quality by closing the zipper fully. If all is straight and neat, remove the basting stitches. If not, adjust. Then sew the second zipper into the other side seam. Now take the pocket bags. Find their right and wrong sides. And place them right side to the wrong side of the zipper tape. Align notches 10 and 11, pin first on one side. Then do the same with the second bag on the other side. Pin the pieces like this. You can also baste them. Now sew the pocket bags with the same seam width as the zipper. Backstitch at the start and end. While sewing, open the zipper for convenience. At the end, close the zipper, move the slider, and finish the seam 2 to 3 stitches below the mark. Sew the second pocket bag the same way. Now both pocket bags are sewn. Trim the excess zipper to the pocket bag edge. Make a bar tack about 1 centimeter above the bag end so the coil doesn't unravel. Then press the whole area. Now press this whole area. Spread the pocket bags to different sides and press. Do not press hard so as not to damage the zipper coil. Turn to the right side, smooth the fabric, and press lightly over the coil. Now we will make decorative top stitching along the pocket opening on the front half of the trousers. And later, when we sew the pocket bags, we will make the top stitching on the other side. Now, while we have pressed and everything lies smooth and neat here, it is worth securing the pocket bag to the front trouser half. For this, I take pins and pin the pocket bag through to the front half. Then I fixed it here with pins. You can repin them to the right side, since we will stitch from the right side. Or you can simply baste this edge to make it easier. I still recommend basting, so the piece does not shift while sewing. Do the same on the other half. Now we need to stitch like this on the front half of the trousers. From mark 10, then turn, sew along the pocket opening line, and finish the seam here at mark 11. Choose the width you prefer, either 0.5 or 0.7 centimeters. At the beginning, sew very carefully, since here we have the teeth or coil of the zipper. So make the first stitches by turning the hand wheel manually. Here, make a backstitch. Be sure to check that on the wrong side everything lies nicely. Then turn the piece. Next, I stitch the seam. When we reach the zipper, I lift the foot and open the zipper so it does not get in the way. Then I continue stitching. I sew up to mark 10, turn again. And here I make a neat backstitch. This is how the stitching looks. Now it can be pressed. We will sew the second half of the top stitching after finishing the side seam. Now we can remove the basting threads. Press the finished seam. Place the pocket bags on top of each other, right sides together, so that the pocket bag is directed toward the front trouser half. Lay it as it falls naturally. If there are extensions of half a centimeter to a centimeter, that's fine, it should be this way. Now we pin along the edge of the pocket bags. Then it will be necessary to trim where the pocket bag extends beyond the edge. It is better to pin the pocket bag along the edge like this, so that it is easier to trim the edge with scissors. I pin the pocket bag edges together like this. Here we can see and define the cutting line. Cut the excess. Then sew the pocket bags together with a 1 cm seam, backstitching at start and end. At the end, also sew the zipper taped to the pocket bag. Here you can switch to a straight stitch. This way the pocket bag is already sewn. Now the allowances need to be serged. We will serge from the side of the back pocket bag. At the same time, serge the lower edge of the zipper. Now trim the zipper so the serger knife does not get damaged. And carefully serge this area as well, finishing over the zipper too. This edge is secured together with the zipper by serging. At the bottom of the pocket, the zipper is also secured with the serger, together with the handbar tack we made on the zipper. Now we need to clip the allowance at the top of the zipper at the level of the last stitch we made when attaching the zipper. Clip the allowance of the front trouser half, stopping 2 mm before the seam. So it can be turned to the other side of the trousers. Next, we will serge the side edge. At the bottom of the zipper, I also make a notch under the last stitches, stopping 1 to 2 mm before the side seam line. Then I turn the allowances toward the back trouser allowance. I lay everything like this, and then serge the entire side edge. We serge from the side of the front trouser half. So the face stitch will be on this side, since later we will press the allowances toward the back half of the trousers. To serge the side edge in the zipper area, I switch off the knife for now and also open the zipper so it does not interfere with sewing down. Then, when I reach the zipper pull, I will close it. Lay the piece and serge along the side edge. Here I reach the zipper again and feel it with my fingers. Now I need to close it. If you cannot, then finish the seam. The long thread ends must be unraveled, tied in several knots, and hidden inside the seam. After that, close the zipper. I continue stitching from the place where I finished. Now I place the side seam under the serger and set the needles at the point where we just ended the seam. Again, the long thread ends are unraveled carefully, tied in a few knots, and hidden inside the seam. Now press the side seam and the seam joining the pocket bags. Then lay out the trouser halves face down and press the side seam allowances toward the back half of the trousers. Now we need to top stitch the second side of the pocket opening. For this, we will first secure the allowances with pins. Next, we need to mark the same width of the pocket opening stitch as we did on the other side. I mark the stitching line 0.5 centimeters from the edge. Now we need to make another seam, starting from mark 10. Turn at the corner, stitch along the pocket, turn at the corner again, and finish at mark 11. For convenience, you can base this area to make the stitching easier. We sew a straight stitch, with a stitch length of 3 mm. When reaching the slider, lower the needle, lift the foot, and open the zipper. Lower the needle again and finish the seam. Here is the top stitching we got. Check its quality. If everything is fine, remove the basting threads. And this is how the pocket looks. Here is the view from the wrong side. I made the second pocket in the same way. Now the finished pocket needs to be pressed, and we will move on to sewing the inseam of the trousers. Place the trouser pieces right sides together, aligning the inseams. Match notches 16 and pin them. Also match notches 19, 20 at the bottom edge of the trousers, and pin at the crotch point as well. Then pin the edges between the notches. Do the same for the second inseam of the trousers. Now sew the inseams with a backstitch at the beginning and end of the seam. Then serge the edges from the side of the front trouser halves. I make an elastic zigzag stitch 1 cm from the edge. Now we will press the seams. And press the allowances using a sleeve pad. First, be sure to press the seam itself. Now place a sleeve pad inside. Then press the allowance toward the back half of the trousers. In the same way, press the inseam on the other trouser leg. Now the trouser pieces are prepared. With the crotch seam not yet sewn, I set the trousers aside for now. Now we prepare the cuffs. Take the cut pieces and find their pairs. This is the back cuff piece, and this is the front cuff piece. Now we need to sew the inseam on the cuffs, the one that is not interfaced. For this, place the pieces right sides together, pin first at the fold line, and also match and pin notches 19 and 20. Then pin between the notches. Do the same with the second cuff pieces. Now sew the inseams of the cuffs with an elastic stitch, making backstitches at the beginning and end. Place the cuff pieces on the ironing board. First, press the seams. Then place the pieces face down and press the seams open. Now fold the cuff pieces wrong sides together, matching notches 20 and 19. This is the inseam seam. Also match notches 13 and 14. And press the fold of the cuffs. Now we need to prepare the zippers. If they are too long, trim the extra length and measure how much you need for the finished zipper. I measure and mark the point where I need to cut it now. This is the length the zipper should be. Do the same on both pieces. Check that the zippers are the same length, and then cut them evenly. To keep the cut edge from fraying, carefully melt it slightly, being very careful not to damage it. Then, to keep the teeth from separating while working, secure them with a bar tack. Just as we did when sewing the zipper into the pocket. At 0.5 centimeters from the edge, make a few stitches like this. Now the zipper needs to be pinned. For this, I open it and place it face to face with the fabric. The free tape of the zipper I fold like this, and place the stopper to the fabric fold. Literally, so that the distance from the fold to the stopper is just a few millimeters. I fix everything with pins. Then pin along the entire length of the zipper tape. Next, I baste the zipper tape with hand stitches so that it does not shift during work. Now I unzip the zipper and place it onto the second cuff. I pin and baste in the same way. Baste it also on the second cuff. Now we sew the zipper at a distance of 1 centimeter from the edge, and necessarily with backstitches at the beginning and end of the seam. Now we sew with a simple straight stitch. I set the stitch settings to standard. Stitch length 2.5 to 3 millimeters. I install the zipper foot. We reach our slider. Lift the foot. The needle also needs to be raised. Then close the zipper. Place the needle back in the same spot where it was just before. And sew the zipper to the end. Make a backstitch here. The zipper is sewn. Now sew the same way on the second cuff. Now we need to sew the second side of the zipper. I place the piece like this, right sides together, aligning the side edges. Again I place the zipper in the same way as the previous time, but now on the other side. So that when closed, everything matches. I check here notches 13 to 14, to make sure they match. I align the edge of the zipper with the edge and pin. Here also. It is necessary to fold the free end of the tape and carefully place the stopper right at the fold of the cuff. Then I pin further in the same way and baste with hand stitches. Sew the second side of the zipper, with back stitches at the beginning and end of the seam. Similarly, I sew the zipper to the second cuff. So we have sewn the zipper. Check the quality of the completed operation. If everything suits us, remove the temporary basting threads. We have sewn the zipper. Now it is necessary to sew the second part of the cuff. For this, unzip the zipper, take the second part where the zipper is not sewn, and place right side to the wrong side of the zipper. Align this edge, pin. Here you need to carefully lay everything so that the fold is correctly formed. Like this on one side. And do the same on the other side. Here is the result. We also baste this part. In the same way, I pin and baste the details on the second cuff. Now we go to the sewing machine and we'll sew the second half of the cuff. For this, we turn the piece to the side where we can clearly see basting seam. And now we need to make the second seam exactly in the basting seam, so that when we turn it out, everything looks neat and nice from the right side of the zipper. Before sewing, we look from which side we will now begin stitching. Specifically in this place, we will begin from here. So, we need to close the zipper now. We close it. Place it under the foot. Check that everything lies evenly here. Check everything. And then we go to the machine and sew the seam. Here make a backstitch. We sew until the moment where the slider begins. And when it is no longer possible to sew further, we lift the foot in the same way as before, move the slider, and finish the seam in this direction. On the other side, the opposite. If it is inconvenient for you to move it, make a backstitch and completely remove the piece from under the machine. Turn the piece out, find the slider, open it, and again place it correctly. Then finish the seam. Here again make a backstitch. And finish sewing the second part of the cuff in this way. We do this because this area is quite thick, and the slider does not move so easily. Therefore, it is better to sew the seam in 2 steps. And so everything is sewn. First check how everything turned out. Then, if everything is fine, remove the temporary basting threads. Now we need to turn the cuff fully right side out, straighten it, and see how it looks. You can zip it up carefully. And everything looks good. In the same way we sew the second part. For this we turn it inside out again, from the side where we did not sew, find where we need to sew the seam. From this side, now from above. Here I immediately find the slider, open it, and now we'll sew from the cuff fold to the edge. Everything is sewn on the second side. Again, first, turn everything right side out, straighten it, check if everything is fine and suits me, the appearance, the seam. Now we can remove the temporary basting threads and press our finished cuff. In the same way, I complete the second cuff. When you have turned everything out, be sure to check that here you have the same height of the cuff, so that it is not the case that one is higher, the other lower. If you have such a situation, then it will be necessary to unpick the second side and sew again, laying it out correctly as necessary. Now the finished cuffs need to be pressed. For this I will use such a tailor's ham, placing it inside the cuff. If you do not have one, you can simply lay it out and press. Now we take our prepared pant legs and also the cuffs. And we will sew the cuffs to the bottom of our pants. In order to sew the cuffs to the pants correctly, it is necessary to determine where the front and back halves of the cuffs are. Here I laid the pants in front of you with the front half up. Face up, here is the wrong side. Here is the front. The front pant legs, just like the front halves of the cuffs, are a little narrower than the back ones. Next, I place them so that the zipper is opposite the side seam, and the plain seam is opposite the inseam. And in this way I match the pairs of cuffs and pants, so as not to mix them up now. Carefully turn one pant leg inside out. Then I need to place the cuff right sides together. Match notches 13 and 14 at the side seam and zipper, and notches 19 and 20 at the inseam of the pants and cuffs. Then pin the second part in the same way. I pin the second cuff into the pant leg. This is how it looks. This is the side seam. This is the inseam. Here also inseam and side seam. Next, we need to sew in the cuff. The seam will be sewn from the cuff side in this way. We sew the seam, making backstitches at the beginning and end. Then serge the seam allowances from the cuff side. Do this on both halves. When you sew in the zipper area and the overlock seam, pass carefully, turning the handwheel manually. After you have sewn in the cuffs, the long thread ends must be tied into several knots and hidden in the thickness of the seam. This is how we have sewn in the cuffs. The edges are finished. Now they need to be pressed and pressed toward the pants. Lay them out and press the allowances toward the pants. We do this carefully, without pressing the iron too hard. Just pass over with steam so as not to leave marks on the fabric. Now from the right side we need to sew a decorative securing stitch. To make this convenient, unzip the zipper. It is better to start the seam at the inseam, so that there is no backstitch at the side seam. We place the pant leg under the foot. The seam will be sewn at a distance of 0.7 centimeters from the seam. Next, we need to sew the crotch seam. For this, we turn one of the pieces to the right side and place this piece inside the other pant leg, which is now turned to the wrong side. In this way we place the pieces face to face. We align the crotch seams with each other, so that there is no thickening. Here we spread the seam allowances in different directions. We pin with pins. Next, it is necessary to match the notch at the seat seam on the back halves of the pants. Then match notches 9. Next, we need to match the mark of the zipper end on the front halves of the pants. Then pin the pieces between the notches. Now it is necessary to sew the crotch seam. From the zipper end mark on the front halves we stitch along the entire crotch seam to the waist edge on the back halves of the pants. The crotch seam must be sewn with an elastic stitch. We stitch at a distance of 1 centimeter from the edge, starting from the zipper end mark. Now we spread the front halves. I take one front half and serge it slightly below the zipper end mark, literally by 2 centimeters. The stitch is laid from the right side of the piece. Such a stitch, here you can carefully undo, tie a knot and hide it under the stitch. Now we need to serge the entire crotch seam, turning the seam allowance of the front half, which we have already serged, to the side during serging. In the final version, the top stitch was on the right side of the fabric. So now I need to stitch from the waist edge on the back halves to the waist edge on the front halves. Now the crotch seam must be pressed, also press the serged seams. Pressed, and we turn the pants to the right side. Press the crotch seam allowance on the back halves of the pants to the left side. We join the bodice with the pants along the waist edge. For this, along the waist edge we find the notch of the center back, mark 9, and match it with the crotch seam of the back halves of the pants, also mark 9. We pin with a pin, aligning the edges. Next, the side seams of the pants and the bodice, this is mark 7, we also match and pin with pins on both sides. We also pin the pieces along the center seam, mark 6. Then we pin the pieces between the marks, aligning the waist edge. Sew the waist edge on the sewing machine, laying a straight elastic stitch at a distance of 1 cm from the edge and making backstitches at the beginning and end of the seam. Finish the seam allowances on an overlock or with an overlock imitation stitch. Sew from the pants side, since the waist allowance will be pressed toward the bodice. Now the waist seam must be pressed. Next, press the allowances toward the bodice. To fix the position of the allowances, use a wooden block or a tailor's cushion. Also, for ironing convenience, you can place the tailor's cushion under the seam and press the allowances on it. Along the waist seam, sew a decorative stitch at a distance of 0.7 cm from the seam. Here we use a regular straight stitch with a stitch length of 3 to 3.5 mm. At the beginning and end of the stitch, make a backstitch. After overlock sewing, undo the long thread ends, tie them in several knots, and hide them inside the seam thickness. Do the same near the neckline and the stand collar. Hide this thread in the seam thickness. Now we will sew in the zipper along the center seam of the jumpsuit. For this, fully unzip the zipper and place one side of the zipper face to face with the bodice. The top stopper of the zipper should be located at the seam where the stand collar is sewn to the neckline. We align the edge of the zipper tape with the center edge and pin it. Then pin the zipper along its entire length from the neckline to the zipper end mark on the front halves of the pants. We place the zipper without stretching either the zipper or the garment edge. And now we baste the zipper with hand stitches. Sew in one side of the zipper using a zipper foot. Sew at a distance of 1 cm from the edge, making backstitches at the beginning and at the end of the seam. Carefully stitch in the area of the waist seam, because there is a thickening there and you can break the needle. Here is how the zipper is sewn. Here I finished exactly at the point of the zipper end. Now it is necessary to fasten the second half of the zipper, if it is separable, as in my case. And on this side it is necessary to transfer the control mark so that when we sew the second side of the zipper, the seams coincide and are not at different heights. Therefore, we necessarily transfer this mark to this side. Now we need to pin, baste, and sew the second side in the same way as this one, but already on the other side, aligning our control mark so that everything matches here. For this, I unzip it and now it must be placed with the face side of the zipper to the face side of the jumpsuit. This way I place the stopper near the beginning of the stand collar and also fix it with pins here and along the entire length. We also align the marked notch with the waist seam and pin it for fixation. This way I basted the second side, aligning the necessary marks. Now the zipper must be fastened and checked whether everything aligned well. Now at the basting stage, I fasten and check. Here, if it is sewn like this now, it matched. And it is also important to check at the neckline so that here in the finished look everything closes nicely and is at the same level. For me everything is good, and now I move on to sewing the second side. For this, I fully unzip it again and will now stitch along the second side, starting from here. If the slider gets in the way here, move it aside and now sew the other side of the zipper. And then again check whether everything matched here. I place the garment under the machine and will stitch, starting from the placed zipper end marked to the neckline. Yes, sewn. Now I fasten the zipper fully again and check how everything matched here. If something does not suit me, I will adjust it. Along the waistline everything matched well, along the neckline also everything matched well. This is how it should look for you also in this area. If you have some places that need adjustment, you need to correct them now. If the waist seam or neckline ended up a bit higher or lower, fix it now. And then we will stitch the final decorative stitch along the zipper as well as along the neckline. If everything suits you with the zipper, you need to remove the temporary threads. Press the seam of the zipper sewing. The zipper must be pressed to the wrong side. Do this carefully, do not stay in one place for long so as not to damage the plastic teeth with the iron. To fix the position, use such a wooden block or a tailor's cushion. At the neckline area, with the free tape of the zipper, I cover the seam allowance and turn it to the wrong side. I place it carefully, press it, and you can immediately fix it here with pins. We baste the edge with the zipper to neatly and correctly fix the position of the seam allowances before laying the final decorative stitch. This is how I basted everything, basted this edge. Carefully lay out here the stitching line of the stand collar so that it is at the same level and not at different ones. Fasten, check everything before laying the decorative stitch. Also check everything here so that everything is good in this area. And only then, after you have checked that everything matches nicely everywhere and lies well, we can begin laying this final decorative stitch. We stitch along the neckline, we stitch at a distance of 0.1 centimeters from the seam. Along the zipper sewing line we stitch at 0.7 centimeters. So, we start sewing, for example, from the shoulder, make a neat backstitch, go along the neckline, and stitch the whole zipper like this. Here we go with such a frame, also at a distance of 0.7 centimeters from the sewn edge. And go back here again and finish at the neckline. After you have laid the stitch, if everything suits you and nothing needs to be redone, remove the temporary threads. And now we need to press the stitch and do the final pressing of our garment.